What I would say is, if your kid or if anyone you know has dreams, don't force them to like something. Force them to like following what they want to do. If they want to do art, if they want to do computer science, leave them to it, because your brain and your heart learns best when you do something you want to do. Like if you want to do sports, then go ahead. Like, I'm not forcing you to not do sports. If you have an idol that does something that you aren't really interested in, then go ahead, take their motivation, take their inspirational quotes, and like just follow your dreams.
Friends, I'm very happy today to introduce you to I Gusti Ngurah Rayner Bisma Setiawan. He goes by Rayner Setiawan, and he's the young man behind a very popular science social media page, Instagram, SciencloPodia.
SciencloPodia. It's a really weird name.
SciencloPodia is a very fascinating Instagram account, and it focuses on spreading the love of science, and then within it, very effective disseminations of hard sciences like astronomy, biology, and others, but wrapped in a way that many people can understand. And you should go check in about it. And so, Rayner, welcome to Chronicles.
Hi, Om Bagus.
Hello.
Thank you for inviting me.
You can call me Om. That's fine. So I've been fascinated. I have 3 children. I've got an 8-year-old, and you started this channel when you were 8-year-old, SciencloPodia, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm really interested in getting to know how you come about making that channel. So what inspired you to do that?
So SciencloPodia basically just started off with like me and my love for science. So what I did was I basically like kept reading books, and then my mom and dad helped me out by telling me that if I really love science, then I could start something like a podcast. I could start an Instagram account where I could share my knowledge. And then like that's how it came about. So SciencloPodia just came about as like a place where I could share all my knowledge and a place where I could learn.
Okay. You were in the United Kingdom at the time when the channel started, right?
Yes.
All right. So what were your parents doing at the time?
My dad was getting his PhD, and my mom was getting a degree in business. I think it's a master's, but I'm not too sure.
Okay. You're not sure?
Yeah.
You better go check about it after this. So you were 8-year-old, so you were already in school.
Oh, yes,
right?
I was in school.
You're already in school. You were in year 2, approximately.
No.
Year 2, year 3? Year 2, I think.
Year 3 or year 4? I'm not too sure.
Okay. But most of the stuff you discussed in SciencloPodia, they were not taught yet at school, haven't they?
Yes, it wasn't taught yet because it was from my pure interest in science, and it wasn't from something that I've learned at school.
Yeah, so how did your friends react to your side job?
Yeah, they cheered me on because, well, they're my friends. And then, like, yeah, I just stayed humble because it wasn't even that popular at that time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it was growing quite fast at a very rather short period of time.
During the pandemic, I believe it was when it grew the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. And so I see you get a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of Indonesian people, and not just Indonesian people, everywhere tuning into your channel. So within the first couple of months when that channel first began, what were your favorite subject?
Like I wasn't too sure. Like as of right now, I'm most interested in biology, but I believe back then it was into biology still. Because like I kept reading books, and then I found out that, yeah, I like biology the most because it's all around us. Like my skin is literally just dead cells. My eyes are just made out of cones and rod cells. And that tree out there, yes, made out of cells. So so I really find it fascinating because the whole world around us is literally like made out of cells.
Yeah, they're all organic things, organic beings. And was there anybody particularly inspiring you to liking biology? Is there any figures, scientists that you
yes
follow dearly?
It was Jennifer Doudna because she discovered
That's right.
Well, I shouldn't say discover, because she didn't really discover the system, but she found a way to use a system called CRISPR-Cas9 to edit the genomes of something like strawberries or something. So CRISPR-Cas9 wasn't something that was like relatively new. In fact, it is just a bacteria's immune system. So what they would do is it would take like snippets of virus DNA, and the next time a virus of that type like attacked it, then it would like match the snippets to the new virus DNA, and then it would like terminate the DNA if it was a match. So Jennifer Doudna really just like it found a new way, which was much cheaper and like much more accessible, because I believe back then it was really expensive, but now you can like genetically modify an organism really cheaply because of her. So like I take her as inspiration.
I see. Do you see yourself pursuing the footsteps of Jennifer Doudna?
Yes, because I really like molecular biology, and one of like the questions or one of like the subjects I'm learning now is about enzymes and cellular respiration, and I really like find it weird how like enzymes are just long chains of like say complex molecules, and like how come cells have evolved into like something into machines that have a specific order for each enzyme. So like it's kind of like fascinating.
Yeah, not only that, it has self-replicating properties also.
Yeah.
It can keep on going. It can keep on going. But your dad isn't studying biology, right? When he was he was studying something else.
Yeah, he was studying geomechanics, I believe.
All right, that didn't inspire you to study geomechanics.
No, but my dad working every day, like plotting the stress in rocks, like kind of inspired me, because I saw what he did, and then I was like, whoa, that's cool. Like I may not be attracted to geomechanics, but I may be attracted to biology, but I can take that motivation from my dad. So if you have a role model, it doesn't have to be in what topic or what passion you have right now. Like try to take their motivation, why they do it, because who knows, maybe they have something that that you can take from.
I see. Well, is there any particular subject that your dad was studying that he taught you? You mentioned about rocks. Is there any other things? I myself study to some degree a little bit of geomechanics, but I'm a fluid guy. So I don't study the mechanics part of geology. I study the fluid part of geology.
So I think so what happened was like the most I learned from my dad was by asking him questions like, why do planes fly? And then he showed me the aerofoil, and then I always wondered why the aerofoil moves up, and then he explained to me, and then I asked him like, why does who invented gravity? Who was Einstein? Because I'm pretty sure most kids nowadays, they know who Albert Einstein was. And then he'd like explain everything to me. Okay. So like in my opinion, having a supportive parent is something that could nurture a kid to at least try to achieve their goals.
Well, you're lucky. I'm really hoping that I could have done the same thing with my 8-year-old, just like your dad taught you all of these really beautiful things. And well, you mentioned your dad teaching you how airfoil moves up and down. So what did you take from that? So how does it move up and down?
So let's start off with this cup. So before
right. Okay.
Yes, so I recall before we had this podcast, we talked a bit. So what I basically asked you was that if we had a hole here, and if we had a hole here, like supposing this was full, then the hole at the bottom would, like the stream at the bottom would move much farther than the stream at the top, because according to Bernoulli's principle or equation, there's more hydrostatic force on the bottom. There's less hydrostatic force on the bottom than in the top. So like Bernoulli's equation says that it's gonna have to compensate in like velocity and pressure. which is just the same thing for aerofoils, because an aerofoil basically like allows so an aerofoil like splits the air into two pathways. One of them goes over it and one of them goes under it. But the one that goes over it moves relatively faster, and and according to Bernoulli's principle, if something moves faster, then there's going to be less pressure, because it's like quote unquote compensating for like having low pressure. So the one on the bottom, because it has like way less velocity, then it's going to have way more pressure.
That's so fascinating. I'm sure that is not yet taught in your school, right? I don't think people get fluid mechanics before they go to at least year. I'm not sure how it converges, but I didn't get fluid mechanics up until I was in college.
Like
that's impressive.
Because like most of the things I learn actually comes from curiosity. So what I would say, although it's not the end of the podcast yet, what I would say is, if you're a kid or if anyone you know has dreams, don't force them to like something. Force them to like following what they want to do. If they want to do art, if they want to do computer science, leave them to it, because your brain and your heart learns best when you do something you want to do. Like if you want to do sports, then go ahead. Like I'm not forcing you to not do sports. If you have an idol that does something that you aren't really interested in, then go ahead, take their motivation, take their inspirational quotes, and like just follow your dreams.
Well, I still vaguely remember when I was 8-year-old. When I was 8-year-old, I was just playing video games all day. If my mom didn't force me to study, I would just stay in front of video games. Well, no, I was just teasing. But you're very right. So I was particularly interested in your understanding of fluid mechanics concept. That wasn't easy. So what you're saying in regards to water shooting out faster if it were released from the bottom of the glass rather than at the center or even at the top is governed by Bernoulli's principle, Bernoulli principle. And that is exactly the same principle that guides the fluid behavior around the airfoil that makes airfoil moves up rather than down. So I think the more elegant way to explain it is that in Bernoulli's equation, energy is conserved. So whenever you got moving energy, which is kinetic energy, and you get an internal energy, which is what we know as pressure, the combination of both energies, they stay constant in a streamline of a moving fluid. So whenever you have increasing pressure, the kinetic energy has to compensate it in order so that the total combination of that energy stays constant. So the water shooting out from the bottom compensates the lack of pressure at that point. So the velocity has to be bigger so that the kinetic energy gets bigger. And you were absolutely right. The governing equation applies in the context of aerospace engineering and airfoil. So the combinations of Bernoulli's equations and the good design makes the aircraft flies. Now, that principle also applies in biology, surprisingly. So you're interested in biology. There's a lot of fluid mechanics in biology.
Yes.
Right. Could you imagine anything that would follow that principle?
I'm not too sure about fluid mechanics in biology, but like what I know, which is like weakly related, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's what science is all about, is in like cell membrane pumps or like insects flying.
Okay.
Like like when a dragonfly flies, I believe there's a pressure difference or something, but like I'm not too sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments.
You haven't been wrong so far.
Really?
You're absolutely right. Did you watch Dune?
No.
No, you didn't. Well, there's a moving aircraft there that behaves not like a helicopter, but like a dragonfly.
Wait, so how do dragonflies fly though? Is it just like beating it? Like beating like...
Yeah. Well, in the scientific term is by means of high fidelity wings, high fidelity. So instead of rotating movements like what a helicopter would utilize for it to move up, the thrusts come from flapping motions. So it's basically, yes, as you say it, flapping or pushing air down and therefore thrusting the body upwards.
Oh, so like
Right.
if it's flapping it down, then there's gonna be like more pressure there.
Well, imagine you swimming, right? What do you do in order to propel yourself forward? You got to push the water backwards.
Back.
Yeah, and that's how you move yourself forward. Just like air, where dragonfly fly, right? Air is also fluid, just like water. So in a way, they behave in the same way, although not entirely. But yeah, the same principle that guides the propellers in a submarine also guides the propeller in a flying objects.
So like fluid mechanics is like very diverse then. Wait. So like, correct me if I'm wrong, but so when you swim,
Yeah.
can Bernoulli's principle or equation be applied? Like, I know water is incompressible, but like when you push back, like is there like less water in the front of your hand than in the back of your hand?
Yes, you're very right.
Oh, really?
You mentioned about Bernoulli's equation,
Yeah.
right? Bernoulli's equation can only be used in the context of incompressible fluid.
Oh yeah. Like
So I made simplification by saying that Bernoulli equation can be instantaneously applied in the context of aircraft moving within air. But in a strict sense, Bernoulli equation must be used in the context of incompressible flow. So it can only be used in fluid like water, oil, or toothpaste, anything that is not compressible. Air is compressible.
Why is that? Like, just asking.
Yes. Okay. So there are two ways you can come up with Bernoulli's equation. You can derive it mathematically. You can derive it from Newton's law. Do you know Newton's law?
I don't know the equation behind it, but I do know why it is vaguely.
Yeah, Newton's law is a law that governs the way anything moves. Okay. So you can derive Bernoulli's equation from there, or you could derive it from conservations of energy. Now, in the way you derive the Bernoulli's equation, you have to assume incompressibility, because that shows up in one of the terms in the equation, that if it were incompressible, that terms wouldn't disappear. So Bernoulli equation, as you know it now, assumes incompressibility. Now, if you want to use it beyond the context of incompressible fluid, you have to modify it a little bit. It won't be too much of a modification, but you won't call it Bernoulli anymore.
So what was your research about? Was it like making up like that equation, or was it like something else?
Making up that equation to some point, yeah. Well, so I was a mechanical engineer for my undergraduate, and then I studied physics in my graduate schools, and then I did mathematics and then earth science, just like your dad. And then I'm now teaching at environmental engineering and chemical engineering. So if you look at all of these disciplines that I mentioned to you about, fluid appears in every single one of them.
Yeah, like biology, chemistry, earth science.
Yes. So you'd find fluid in biology, obviously, because you got non-Newtonian fluid flowing through you. We call it blood.
Yeah.
And in aerospace engineering, obviously, you have to design moving objects, and therefore you have to solve fluid flows in the air. And then in geology, you have to solve fluids because you want to get oil out of the ground, or you want to store carbon dioxide, which we're going to talk about later.
Yeah, carbon capture.
Carbon capture and storage. Well, what do you know about it?
So my dad's taught me about it. So basically, like they take carbon dioxide and then they put it down into the ground.
Yes.
Where they like store it or something.
Yes. And Indonesia has a big potential for doing that because we have a vast amount of depleted oil reserves. And that's a good, perfect site to store carbon dioxide in the ground. And do you know what storing carbon dioxide means for the planet?
It means that like Correct me if I'm wrong, though. Like, there's gonna be less global warming because there's less carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
That you are absolutely right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So rather than releasing it to the atmosphere,
Which will block the sunlight from
Which-
coming back out.
yes, and creates what's so-called the greenhouse gas effects, right? So we take those carbon dioxide, which would otherwise be released to the atmosphere, and inject it deep underground.
So it can't block any heat then.
So it cannot, block the sun.
But like, what
from
if
being
like?
reflected back to the atmosphere? Yeah,
But what if like it leaks?
a very good question. Then somebody will be very unhappy, especially if the storage site is behind your house. So leakage is a big problem. And so before you identify an ideal site that you want to put this carbon dioxide in the ground, you have to identify the rock structures. Your dad would know a lot of things about this.
Yeah.
Because the rock structures has to be very particular that it will guarantee the CO2 from leaking out. So you need to identify a site that there is a cap rock. It's a very highly impermeable surface, meaning it's very dense that no fluid can go through naturally. And then you store your carbon dioxide beneath that cap rock. Carbon dioxide, while you put it underground, it's in terms of supercritical fluid. So it's in fluid form. It's not gas. It's in fluid forms. Now it's rather low in density, so it will move up naturally.
Mhm.
Right. So you have to make a cap rock formation strategically placed here so that as the carbon dioxide moves up, it got stuck in there. Now, if something goes wrong with this, it will leak out. So you're right. What if it leaks out? Well, eventually it will leak out. The question is how long and how
yeah.
much. And for scientists to make a elegant contribution to the policies, for example, they need to quantify it. And that's the game, basically. So you need to understand the risk associated with storing carbon dioxide underground. So let's say some rich guy come to you and say, look, we want to store this carbon dioxide underground. You have to say, well, it's going to leak after several years.
Mhm.
And by how much? So that, yeah. But that's one of the ways to battle the climate change.
So that's like, so do you use fluid mechanics and that like to predict like how long the carbon dioxide will stay in and how much it will leak out?
Yes, because the same equation that governs, the velocity of fluid coming out of the bottom of this glass could also be used for predicting the flow of carbon dioxide underground. So eventually you will have to solve fluid again. There's a lot more complications in there because the fluid is not just water. The fluid is, for example, a weak acid. So carbon dioxide mixed with groundwater is a low acidic fluid. So the pH, do you know the pH?
Yeah, it's gonna be like less than 7.
Exactly. Yeah, less than 7. So it's in the region of 4 or 3. So it's a weak acid. It's not 1 or 2, but it's a weak acid. Now, when weak acid come in contact with carbonate rocks, limestones.
Oh, it's gonna like dissolve itself or something.
Exactly.
So that's how it breaks out then.
Exactly. Well done.
So like,
Okay.
so what if it's like a man-made seal? Like, what if we put the carbon dioxide in like a big iron box or something?
That's a good point. The question is, how big should that box be?
Well, if we compress it, like if we compress the carbon, then like, won't it be like not strong enough or something?
Yeah, you can. The question is, how much would it take? Because the amount of CO2 that got stored underground is in thousands of tons. So, right, you could make a box that is highly impenetrable, not just impermeable, it's completely impenetrable. The question is, how much would it cost to do something like that? You have to basically make an entire ship, or at least something as big as a big ship. excavate the existing rocks and then put that structure underground. But
So in your opinion, should we like plant more trees, or should we like send it to space or something?
I have never heard of sending it to space, but yeah.
I mean, like, it's a pretty radical solution, but like planting more trees, especially in countries like Indonesia.
Yeah. Indonesia has a great potential in battling climate change, not just because it has a great facility for storing CO2, but Indonesia has a lot of tropical forests. It has mangroves. It has...
Oh yeah, mangroves.
Exactly. Where can you find the large amount of mangroves?
I don't know geographically, but probably somewhere like East Indonesia.
Yeah, there are a lot in East Indonesia. One area that you can find a lot of mangrove in is in islands of Bangka and Belitung.
Oh, Belitung?
There's a lot of mangrove there. I just visited Belitung in 2019-20, and I brought my students to Belitung Islands. But here's the problem. Belitung is also mining area. It produced a lot of tin or lead, timah, right? And it's one of the largest in Indonesia, if not the world. So it's been hugely exploited. And because of that, the mining of the tin destroyed the environment. They destroyed the mangroves.
So they like cut off trees or like ruin the environment for like the economy.
Right. They not just ruin the economy and environment, they also ruin people's health because it's very toxic environment as a result of this mining activities.
Yeah.
So it's very sad. And Bangka Belitung is not the only areas where it faced that problem. And do you know peatland, gambut in Indonesian?
Not really.
Yeah, in Borneo Islands particularly, there's a vast area of peat. Peat is a very soft structure. It's a living structure, just like a soft soil. And there's a lot of smaller plants that grow above it. And then it is a lot larger natural carbon sink compared to mangrove and forests. So naturally, it sucks CO2 within it and keeps it there. And not just CO2, but also methane, which is...
like more potent than carbon dioxide in terms of like greenhouse gases.
That's right.
Oh, and I've also heard that like cows are being fed like charcoal to like to stop them like I'm sorry, but farting out methane or something.
I've never heard of that, but yeah, charcoal actually has it's made out of carbon, and it has sometimes you can use it to purify water. Carbon per se, it's not bad.
Yeah, like it's everywhere.
Yeah, because the trees breathe in carbon dioxide, right? The carbon dioxide is needed. What's dangerous is an excess of it.
Yeah, like too much of a good thing's bad.
Yes, like chocolates.
Yeah.
No, definitely not chocolate. I eat a lot of chocolates, but yeah, like other things. So that's the problem with battling climate change. It's not just because we have the potential to store carbon dioxide. It's not just because the vast forest, mangrove, or peatlands, but because people don't know what they do to the planet. So they just exploit the area where these highly potential carbon dioxide sinks are, and then they don't preserve it. So your channel, for example, will educate people, because it's not just enough to educate people who make decisions at the very higher level. The people has to understand. And I'm pretty sure if people understand it when they were 8-year-old, they can make a better society.
Like if you think about it, like one person can't make much of an impact, but you watching this right now, you obviously have friends and family, and if you like tell them to stop wasting food or like to stop planting trees, then that could be something good. Because like I'm pretty sure that like one person cannot make a difference, but one community can make a difference, which is what the earth is now. because like the earth needs like people to like stop polluting. I'm pretty sure that the whole community on earth could like really work together to try to stop and mitigate climate change. So anyways, back to the question.
In a way, what you're doing with your channel is making that community, because you have viewers, right? And not only that, you actually engage with scientists, right? I saw some of your interviews with other scientists from Japan, for example. And
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Dr.
her.
Sastia Putri,
Yeah.
right?
I believe she's an environmental engineer or something. I don't quite remember.
Yeah, she's a woman of multi talents, of course, and yeah, and you're making communities there. Now, I'm curious, with all your engagement with these people like myself or Sasti and many others, what are your most memorable episodes or events? Is there anything that particularly, oh wow, that makes me think differently?
Well, if I were to say that, then I'd surely like exclude some members. Which I don't want to do. Which I don't want to do.
All right. Okay.
So what's gonna like in my opinion, it's like every single member or every single person that's been in my podcast has a different view on like how you should have your dreams. So like in my opinion, there is no like most inspirational, because each of them like are inspirational in their own ways.
Yeah.
Like I remember Desra, he told me that like music is good to learn because it trains both like lobes or like sides of your brain. And I do remember that Kak Amira said like follow your dreams and something, which is like really nice considering that there's many people that I've interviewed, and like each one of them gives a different view on having a dream and a potential. So I'd say there's lots of different views on how to have your dream, but there's only one dream, but there's only one person that you're in control of, which is yourself. There's one dream that you have, and there's many different ways to approach your dream, many different ways to like to gain your dream, many different ways to get inspired and start working for your dream. So I won't say that there's one specific memorable moment. I'd say there's one specific memorable topic that they've always talked about, which is how to like work well for your dream.
Okay.
I'm sorry if you didn't understand that.
Yeah, to work well.
How to motivate yourself and how to start from a young age.
I see. Okay. Well, among the people that you engage, I recall you mentioned Pak Desra, which is Indonesian ambassador to the UK and Ireland. Well, he's not a scientist. He's an avid musician, but he's not a scientist. So you engage people of very different backgrounds, not just scientists. What is your biggest challenge when it comes to talking about science to people without science background?
I'd say it's like if you use too complex terms when you communicate, because surely like no one's gonna understand all these complex terms and equations, but someone is going to understand that gravity is something that pulls you down to the center of an object, but they won't understand like the topic. So like in my opinion, the hard part about communicating science is like how to simplify it so that everyone can understand it well without kind of like oversimplifying it. Because if you could say like cellular respiration makes ATP, well, that's just too vague. But like if I were to say cellular respiration takes starch, which is found in like potatoes and rice, and makes ATP from that using specific processes. That's a bit more detailed, but I'm pretty sure that most people could still grasp that.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, the hard part about communicating science to an audience is being specific while trying to keep it simple.
Yeah, because people tend to not like things that they don't understand. So the first step towards making people like a subject is to make them feel like they understand about the subject.
Yeah,
Like-
that's why simplification is important. Then you can dive into the details later on.
Right. You mentioned about gravity, for example. Gravity, at least when it was first conceptualized, wasn't very easy to be made understood by,
Yeah.
by a lot of people. So those things are very challenging. Now, what's that?
This is a toy I brought because I was bored.
Because you were bored.
Yeah, I was
You know,
bored.
when I was bored, definitely not playing with that. Okay, what does it do? It's a Rubik's Cube, I know.
Yeah, it's just a puzzle. In fact, it was invented by this professor trying to like teach his students about like engineering internally. So it has
Oh,
a
I
long
see.
history.
I never knew it was invented by a professor.
Yeah, it was invented
Oh, okay.
by professor trying to teach like Vienna mechanics. Of course, this isn't the original one. This is
Okay.
obviously like say like a spin-off of it.
Oh, okay.
So it was made by a professor trying to teach its students, like his students, on like in interior engineering, I believe.
So he's
I'm
an
not too
engineering
sure.
professor.
Architecture, I believe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like, yeah, he made that as a way to help his students like get like to help his students learn better.
Okay. So what can you do with it? So can you solve it in a way that you make each face colored the same way, given
yeah.
some random input?
So like right now, this is mostly solved because 2 layers are solved. But if I were to do something like this, then this side would be solved, but not the whole thing. So now it's solved. So what I basically
Wow.
did there was I just memorized some algorithms, which is an example of how like because I remember I picked this up in like when I was grade 6, I believe September or December. I did not know anything about it, but like now it's been like 1.5 years. Now I'm able to solve it in 20 seconds, which is
20 seconds.
yeah, like
Okay.
have reached 22 or something, which is
Okay.
a huge step from like 5 minutes, which I was able to solve it in like one year ago. So like this is an example of like how perseverance and dedication can actually work, because I made this quote yesterday. You can never change yourself in under a night, but you can always change your mindset in less than a minute, because you can never like change who you are or like what you do in under a night, but you can always change who you think you are, what you are going to do the next morning you wake up. So like it's been 1 year. Every day there's been 1% improvements, which I believe is from a book named Atomic Habits by James Clear. I recommend you read that book. And my mom told me about it, so thank you so much.
You have a great mom and great dad. And I'm pretty sure even if you give me a whole night, I wouldn't be able to solve that. But I want to put you to a test. I think you just made the input easy for you to solve. Can I try it for you to solve?
Like
Can I mess it up?
Yeah. Here you go.
But you can't see. You sure? I'm going to mess up really bad here.
But don't twist the corner.
Don't twist the corner. No. I wouldn't be able to do that. Okay. So, something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So any cube in any any state in a 3x3 cube at least can be solved in less than 20 moves. But like if you're professional, it can be solved in like 40 moves, because those 40 moves are optimized to have like speed in terms of algorithms and stuff.
Okay, now I believe I have messed it up right now, as randomly as I can. So can I have you solve it?
Yes.
All right. So
would you like me to break it down or go like max speed?
well, both, but do it max speed first, and then you explain the algorithm behind it. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here goes.
So one thing I'd like you to know is that like don't feel intimidated when like speed solving or anything.
I already am.
Cause like it isn't really that hard. It's just memorizing algorithms and like learning a new algorithm every day. So I'll go now. That I got the wrong slot. Oh no.
I wouldn't know. Don't worry.
Oh
Oh
no.
wow.
I've actually messed up big time.
No, I can see it coming together. One side, two. I don't. Okay. Oh wow. This is easy for you, yeah? I believe I didn't count it, but I think this is well under 20 seconds.
No, it felt more like 25. Even worse, could be like
See?
less than 30.
Not only that I cannot solve this, I also have a skewed perception of time. But okay. So can you explain the algorithm behind it?
Yes.
So how are you able to solve this?
So what happens is like I'd like to explain that like when you want to solve this cube, it has to be in like a series of steps. So first step, you want to make a white cross. It can be on any side. It can be a yellow cross, a blue cross, but a white cross is most appealing to beginners because I'm not yet something called color neutral, which is just a fancy term for like saying I can do a cross on every side.
Okay.
So what you want to do here, I'm very bad at cross.
So you have to make a cross-shaped,
Yeah,
at least one face, right?
you want at least one face.
Okay, I see. Right. You want that.
Yes.
Okay.
On any side, it can be a yellow cross, an orange cross.
Okay.
Anything will matter. So next step is to make these two layers, solving two pieces at a time. So there's an intuitive way to solve it, and there's also like an advanced way to solve it. Well, like the advanced way is just a muscle memory, but the intuitive way is like much more fun and logical. So you see these two pieces here. I want those two pieces to go here. So what I do is I do a special algorithm to put it back there. And you see this piece and that piece, I want it to go here.
Yeah.
So then what's gonna happen is that I'll put it out like that. And yeah, it's in there. Now this is the last slot. And I see that these two pieces are next to each other.
Yeah, that's the hardest bit. Usually I stop at that.
And then now it gets put here. So this next step is called OLL, or orientation of the last layer, which basically means that the top part wants to be like the same color, which in this case is yellow. There's 57 algorithms, but I'm not smart enough to memorize all of them. And that's how you do this one, at least. And then now is the last step, or PLL. I believe there's 21 algorithms, correct me if I'm wrong. And then what's gonna happen is that by doing the algorithm, it can be solved. So it's actually quite simple. It's just that when you do it like really fast, it can seem like daunting. Your brain surely cannot like understand or process all that information in one sitting, which is why too much of a good thing is always bad. So like don't try to force yourself to study, have breaks in between.
Yeah. So that, for example, can be optimized. So that means you say under 20 moves, right?
Yes.
So that means even if I have the most random setting in the beginning, there always be at least 20 moves of highly optimized move, obviously.
Yeah. 20 moves is the maximum.
It's the maximum. So at a minimum, there is always optimized 20 moves that can solve it, no matter how complicated the beginning. Mm-hmm. So you can create a computer program complete with motors that can swivel each face independently, that can solve a randomly set up Rubik's Cube. Okay. Does that make you somewhat enticed to dig deeper into the world of programming?
Yes, like I've already tried programming, but I'm not really good at programming. But I'm pretty sure if any of you watching there, if you have your friends, your kids, then surely get them like to dive deep into programming, because speaking another language is good enough, but speaking to computers is something that's really good, because computers, they're everywhere now. If I'm pretty sure that each of you probably have like one or more devices, and if you can speak to computers, then you can get a lot of like power in your hands. Like Bill Gates, he spoke to computers, or he was able to program in, I believe, high school. Am I
Yeah,
correct?
quite an
Yeah.
early age.
So like you can start now if you're like 8 or 7, then you can start now. In fact, you have like 11 years until you go to college, which is something that's really good. That's why like start at a young age and start to develop your interest in something that you want to learn and not something that is good for you know, like learn what you want to learn, because you always and optimally learn when you want to like do something that you want to do. Like let's say I want to join a boxing competition. Do I really want to join that competition, or is it just someone else who's trying to control me? So if I really really like that boxing competition, then I would learn optimally. Like I'd learn all the moves, all the styles. Well, obviously I know nothing about boxing, but if I were put in a boxing competition and I didn't really like boxing at all, I think that it's like not really that great. I prefer reading, I prefer running around, sprinting, then I wouldn't perform as well. Which is why I think that like most of the things that you can do is that you can do optimally is the thing that your body and your brain wants you to do.
Wow. You know, it's interesting that you use the term talking to computer or speaking to computers.
Yeah, that's what my dad always tells me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they call it programming language, because you know, you can use language for communicating or talking to someone. So I teach computational methods for master students at the university. And unlike you, master students, at least at chemical and environmental engineering, don't necessarily know how to code yet, or at least have the idea of algorithm. So it's been quite challenging to teach that, even at a master level. So computer is nothing other than bunch of transistors. So they are made out of special materials. A transistor, well, like what you say, if you use unfamiliar terms like transistor, nobody will get it. But if you say a switch, then people will get it. Now, transistor is just a switch. So basically, if there's a current running this way, then the current running perpendicular to it can flow. If there is no current this way, then this one can't flow. So it's just a switch. It's just a switch. Now, those switches combined together in a specific way create what's so-called logical operators. So, for example, how do you think computer can think about and? You know, like the English word and, this and that, this and that. So how do you make computer think about and? If this and this, then this, right? We can think like that, but imagine how you teach computer into thinking something like that. Now, the way they do that is by arranging these transistors in a specific way, so that they can make it in a specific way, so that if there is a current here and there is a current here, then only that makes the current perpendicular to it can flow. Now you could then make other logical operands like or. So if this or that, then something will happen. Now imagine having to teach computer into doing that. You do it by arranging these switches or transistors in a certain way. Now, once you have these logical operands, you have and, or, not and, not or, then you can combine all of these logical operators into arithmetic operators.
Like binary addition.
Exactly. Guess what you can do when you can add?
Multiply.
Exactly. So once you can add, you can multiply. So that's the way computer does it. Now, the great thing about it is that it does it faster than us. And there is billions of these transistors working at the same time. So you got a stupid switch, because it can only do if this then that, but you got a billion of them working for you all at the same time. That's why it can do complicated tasks that you set upon. So it's like that. So if you are interested in those computational programming world, then remember we talked about fluids in the beginning? We were talking about predicting the way fluid behaves as it moves around the airfoil body. Then you can teach the computer to solve those mathematical equations that governs the way fluid flow, just as the computer can solve the Rubik's Cube if you put the right algorithm. Those transistors or switches that can solve that Rubik's Cube problem can also solve complicated fluid dynamics problems. It's a beautiful world. But what do you think is going to happen if the computer keep getting more and more advanced?
Advances in what, like quantity of transistors or like size of transistors?
So the amount of transistor doubles every unit of time. That's called Moore's law, right? They always double. So every year it doubles. Okay. So that's not what I meant, right? Just by doubling the amount of transistor doesn't make it smarter. But now we live in the world of artificial intelligence. That means that you can train a machine into solving complicated and more complicated problems. So have you thought about that?
Like I've
The
only
world
ever
of AI, the world of...
I've used ChatGPT, and like honestly it's stunning because like I remember one time I was like making like a video game project in C++, and then I asked ChatGPT.
So you know how to code?
Yeah, I do not.
You
code.
use C++.
But I'm not that good. I just use C++ for the libraries.
Wow. Okay.
Like,
okay.
I'm not very good in C++. Like I don't like I just know how to talk with it in how to talk with a computer in C++, but I don't actually know like the advanced bits of C++.
Oh man, you're low-key fire. Okay.
Low level programming language.
Oh well, fine. I use C++. I use C++, but I never learned how to use C++ up until I was a PhD student. Right. So yeah. Oh wow, you're amazing. C++ is very difficult, by the way, compared to other languages, because it's a very, relatively speaking, low-level language, meaning that
manual.
Exactly. Everything is manual. You really have to teach the computer even little details as whether the numbers is real or integers or something like that. Unlike
Python.
Unlike Python. Okay, well done.
But Python is very beginner friendly, and it's like good
That's
for
right.
AI because there's like libraries, I believe.
Yeah, a lot easier than C++ or Fortran. But it's still not graphical language, you know. You still have to input every key and commands manually with a keyboard. Yeah. But what makes you fascinated in using Python? Is it interested in utilizing those programming languages? Was it because you want to make things move, or
for fun? Like
for fun?
Yeah, because like
why not?
Because like don't be like me. Don't code for fun. Like I'm sure like one of you might code for like what, like building a machine or robot. Because I remember I was playing with my Arduino, and then I like saw this project on like the forums where they like made like this car. So like don't be like me. Don't code for the same reason as me.
Well, I can tell you this: when I code, it's only fun when it works.
Oh yeah, true. One time I missed a semicolon.
When it doesn't work, it's not fun, I tell you.
Yeah, one time I missed a semicolon, and there were like a memory leaks, I believe. Very, very stressful.
Oh yes. You know, I would spend nights trying to figure out why it doesn't work. And then one day, I don't recall what I did the night before, and it just worked. And I have no idea why. It doesn't make it feel better. But anyways, well, we've talked a lot about many things. So I don't know if you ever thought about it right now, but there seems to be a lot of subjects you're interested in. But if you can choose one subject that you really aspire to do or to become good at, what would that be?
Molecular biology, because I really want to know how
Okay.
enzymes work. Because enzymes are just like, think about it this way. There's 20 amino acids, which is basically like 20 unique types of like molecules, but those 20 amino acids make hemoglobin, which is basically just like a protein that makes sure you can breathe. It brings your oxygen into your cells. But like, when was your cell able to make hemoglobin? Was it just luck, or was it like with intention? And like, up to this day, like, I don't know much about biology as of right now, but up to this day, I'm not sure from my perspective how and if scientists know how enzymes work. So hopefully when I grow up, I can like help the world understand about enzymes, because enzymes are really useful, like when you
Yeah.
eat food and stuff.
I got to tell you, I wouldn't call it a renaissance, but it's like there's a new development happening all at the same time in the world of organic chemistry.
Oh, really?
Yes. It is not my discipline, but I couldn't tell a lot more than that. But roughly speaking, usually the more notable advances in science were led by either physicists or mathematicians, or to some degree biologists, but to a lesser degree by chemistry. But nowadays, chemists, I think, were starting to become able to explain biological complexities like evolutions from the lenses of a chemist. So molecular biologists is not just biology. Molecular biologists is an interdisciplinary subject. In order to be good at it, you have to understand to a large degree chemistry. But
just like you, because like
just like me, no,
yeah,
not just like
because you were able to study fluid dynamics because you had a
Okay.
background in math, right?
Yes. When I take a look at the carbon dioxide, we solve it using math. When I look at the geothermal problems, I solve it with math. Speaking of biology, I'm also recently interested in biological structures. You mentioned,
Structures.
yeah. So, so animal built structures. That's what I'm interested in. You mentioned before this program, we had a little chat that you're fascinated by ants.
Well, it was my brother, but yeah.
Okay. But you also, you or your brother mentioned that there were no ants you could find in the UK, at least not easily. There's a lot more in here. Ants, bees, termites, these insects, they make superstructures.
Yeah, like under the ground,
Yeah.
termite mounds, I believe.
Exactly, termite mounds. So there are some people that try to put a really hot metal into ants mounds or termites mounds, and then they were able to excavate the structures of the porous parts of the termites mounds. Now, what they found is this. In some species of termites in the Saharan region, the temperature fluctuation outside the mounds can be very hostile. It can go up and down by more than 10 degrees of Celsius.
Really?
Right. Well, yeah, it's an arid region. It's very hostile. In Indonesia, probably it fluctuates between 34 and 36. Okay. Now, but what they found is that the temperature fluctuation inside the mound, the center of the mound, is only within 1 or 2 degrees of Celsius. The reason termites do that, either coincidentally or purposely, is because the queen of the termites colony or ants colony as well, they are very sensitive to temperature fluctuations.
Yeah.
So in order to protect the queen, because when the queen dies, the whole colony usually dies, which is very fascinating in its own right. As a biologist, you're interested in that. But as a mechanical engineer, as a chemist, I'm interested in the sophistication of the structures of the mounds. How can bunch of insects work together blindly and create a structure that can regulate its own temperature so nicely that it propagates only 1 or 2 degrees of Celsius, no matter what happens outside? And we, as human, we can't do that without relying on air conditioners. See, that's a very profound question.
Well, isn't that much like how transistors like make programs and stuff? Like,
Maybe.
we could say each ant is a transistor. Like, one
Yeah.
transistor probably doesn't even know that what it's part of, but like,
That is a very interesting analogy. Both transistor and ant can be called agents. One is more sophisticated agent than the other. And eventually, we human too, we are agents. But maybe one can say that unlike ants or transistors, we have free will, you know, or maybe we don't. I don't know. That's beyond me. But you're right. So the idea for the ants or termites to have agent-based decision-making property, like a switch, it has a decision-making property. Termites also have decision-making property. But what's interesting is that collectively, as a colony, they can collaborate and make these superstructures so sophisticated that even us human would like to copy that. Wouldn't it be great to make buildings that have the same properties like the termites mound, so that you don't have to pay a lot of energies for air conditioning?
Like, I'm pretty sure that's what, like, I'm pretty sure, like, there's a quote out there. I don't know what book it's from, but I've just heard it online. Like, nature makes its creations very efficient. Like, if you were a human and you were to throw something out, then it wouldn't be like, it's very efficient because like there's snapping of a wrist, movement of an arm and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you were to make a machine, then you'd need gunpowder and stuff, or like a trebuchet, which to some extent isn't as efficient as like just doing this and stuff.
Okay. Well, Rayner, it's been quite fascinating talking to you, and you're so inspiring.
Thank you so much.
And you're not just inspiring for me. I hope my children watch your show and could follow the same pathways you have
so
gone
much.
through. It's quite fascinating, and I hope all the best for you and your future endeavor. Now, before I let you go, do you have any last message to people watching, even the people with the same age, younger than you, or even adults?
What I'd like to say is that if you have an idol, then you don't have to follow your idol's journey. You could sometimes like follow why your idol does it, the pain and the pain your idol's been through. But in conclusion, if you want to do something well, or if you really want to do something, then it has to be from your heart, because you will do something most efficiently and the best if you really want to do it. If you want to join a boxing competition and you really want to do it, then that's when you'll shine the most. If you want to join like a science competition and that's what you want, you'll shine the most. So just follow your dreams, never give up, and always listen from your heart first, then your brain. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Friends, that's Chronicles.